Hello and welcome to this special author interview for the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Spotlight, the event that's taking place in September 29th in Shrewsbury at the Nerdy Cafe. I'm Frasier Armitage, part-time robot, full-time nerd, author of New Yesterday and Time's Ellipse, and joining me today is a fantastic author. She's going to be at the event, she's going to be featured, and it's going to be awesome to hear from her then. But right now, I get the pleasure of talking to LL MacRae. Lauren, how are you doing today?
Hi, Frasier. I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. I'm so excited to talk to you about your books and your writing and the event and different events that are coming up for you. And it's just, yeah, let's get into it. So, are you looking forward to the event in September?
I am, yeah. I'm super honored that Holly has invited me to take part. Really, really excited. I'm going to be on two panels with some amazing authors. I've never actually done a live panel before, so this will be the first time I've ever done something like this in person. And I'm in the deep end because I'm on two of them, but it's going to be a lot of fun, surrounded by people from the SFF genre, indie authors, traditionally published authors, hybrid authors, tons of readers and fans of the genre, hopefully. So it should be a light-hearted and kind of educational type vibe, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So it's something I'm looking forward to for sure.
Oh, definitely. It's going to be so nice just to be surrounded in the company of like sci-fi and fantasy enthusiasts, that whole SFF genre. We all love it so much, don't we? What is it that you especially love about SFF, Lauren?
So for me, it's always escapism. That's been my kind of go-to ever since I was a child. I was always a daydreamer. I was always, staring out of the window on long car journeys and imagining dragons flying alongside us, or, any forests we drove past. I'm like, oh, what creatures could be living in there? What spells could be on these places? I couldn't look at somewhere and not have my mind just kind of create worlds. And that's been my entire life. It didn't stop. I didn't grow out of it. I just am able to write the words that I daydream about now, which is quite a lot of fun. And I've recently started dipping my toe into sci-fi because I've always been fantasy up until about a year ago. And then for some reason, I just picked up a sci-fi book and I'm like, oh, I found a new reading jam. So it's another feather in the escapism bow. It's a bit more grounded in reality, so it can be a little bit scarier in some ways because it's science fiction, but there's still the science behind it, whereas you're never going to see a dragon. So I'm kind of I love exploring new worlds, meeting new people in the forms of characters and cultures and geographies and their own mythologies and legends and tall tales and all of that kind of stuff. It's been a childhood passion that just never went away. Which is probably why I find myself most comfortable in that genre over, something like thrillers or mysteries or crime or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like with sci-fi, if you wanted to do dragons, you'd have to do space dragons, right? To make it really
Yeah,
sci.
you would, yeah. And I've even had people, because I have airships in one of my series, so it's like a steampunk flavored fantasy. And people have always been like, you know what you could do? Instead of having sky pirates there, you could do space pirates in sci-fi. And I'm like, I mean, I could. That's a whole other learning to do. Like, I would be so intimidated to write a sci-fi, but I definitely could. Space pirates, space dragons, and take that kind of epic story off world.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like when a lot of people ask sci-fi writers, "Where did you get your ideas from?" I think a lot of times it's like, well, they just have the same ideas as other people, except they just tag the words "in space" at the end of it, and that's it. That's the that's like half the job done. It's like,
That's the secret.
but but in terms of your series that you've written so far, because you've written two successful series that are awesome in terms of fantasy, which is the World of Lunaria and the Dragon Spirits. Have I got that right? Yeah.
Yeah, very creative name, I know, but yes, that's correct.
So tell us a little bit about your series and about what was it that made you. I know you said about sort of your daydreaming and seeing dragons and experiencing that world and wanting to write it. But what was it that you especially enjoyed about the process of writing those series?
So my debut novel was in the Lunaria series, and it wasn't supposed to be a series. It was just one of those I'd like to write a book one day kind of thoughts. And I was a copywriter for a number of years, so I was writing all day for a living. And I mean, it paid the bills, but it's quite boring in comparison to writing about, dragons and making up your own worlds. So I wrote the first one, not really knowing what I was going to do, not really knowing it was going to be a series. Like I said, it was the daydreaming. I was very inspired by the Final Fantasy video game series, 9 in particular, which is kind of medieval classic style fantasy, but then there's the steampunk element to it with the airships and flying ships and cannons and things like that. And I just thought it was a really cool idea. And I think when you kind of daydream as much as I daydream, and when you consume other worlds, you can't help but think, what would my worlds be like? And if they were my characters or my floating islands or my magic, how would I do that? And that's pretty much where it started. It grew in popularity despite being very rough around the edges, as most of our debut novels are. We don't know what we don't know to begin with, and the fact that people liked it despite those rough edges it was a real confidence boost. And it's like, okay, I have the seed of something here, it could grow. And then I wrote the sequels to that. There's 4 books in that series so far. There's 1 more to go. I hope to wrap that up this year. And then by the time I wrote Dragon Spirits, I had a better idea of how it worked and what the tropes in the genre were and the kind of stories I wanted to tell at that point, because that was quite important. In the start, it was just writing what I thought was fun and exciting. Whereas now, I wouldn't say like I write with a theme in mind, but I think it flavors what I write more. Like there's purpose to why a character would struggle other than, oh, this would be a really cool escape. There's kind of a lot more reasons to why the worlds are the way they are and why the characters are the way they are, and kind of exploring that, the mental health side of things, characters with quieter voices, less mainstream characters whose stories deserve to be told. That's kind of what I'm doing a lot more now. So we all start somewhere. I have no regrets over the rougher start to my author career, but I'm definitely doing things more along the right lines now, I think, and still enjoying it, of course, despite how difficult it can be some days.
Definitely. I feel like having become a parent, a first-time parent, you make all of the mistakes that all the other parents in the world have made, but it's okay, because what happens is that at the end of it, you get the same kind of bundle of joy, and there's nothing, it's all fine. And it's the same with authors, isn't it? Our first book, baby, when it goes out into the world, you've made all of the mistakes that every other author's made, but do you know what? The story's okay. The story's fine. It's great. People love it. People enjoy it. And I feel like there's a lot of crossover with those two things in my brain, which kind of helps me reconcile my debut, because otherwise I'd just be like head in hands.
Yeah, it's really tough. And I rewrote my debut and re-released it as a second edition in, I want to say 2021, I think. I don't recommend it. I'm happy with because you learn so much by writing multiple books, and you kind of apply those lessons to the early ones. So it's better, but it's not something I would recommend. Just you've made those mistakes, you've learned those lessons, just always move forward. Small tip there.
Yeah. And do you feel as though for, one of the things that's helped you to learn your skill and learn your craft has been sort of that sense of community that you have become a part of since releasing your debut? Because obviously, your skills have improved the more that you've written, but how big is that community aspect to your writing and your development?
Massive. It really is massive. I mean, they say writing or being an author is a very lonely job. And in a sense it is, because it's just you putting those words on the page, but it's a whole community project. I mean, it's like funny what you should mention about being a parent. And the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to get a book out as well, because you've got your peers that you're bouncing ideas off of. You've got editors that you're working with, beta readers, advanced reader copy groups. You've got the fans, I like to say, that, people that read it and really like it and then connect with you either over email or face-to-face at events and things like that. And you do become part of this community. Because you strive to lift each other up, you strive to learn from each other, you strive to help each other. Friends that have new releases, you shout about those. readers that liked your book, you recommend your friends' books to them if it's, you know, a similar style, something that they'd like. So that community spirit is something that I didn't know was a thing when I first started writing. I think I first fell into it when I discovered SPFBO or SPIFBO, because I did submit my debut into year 4, and it became a semi-finalist, and that was kind of my introduction to the community. And I was like, oh, there's a whole group of people out there that are supportive and encouraging and positive and want to champion indie books in a way that I never experienced kind of in day-to-day life. You know, I feel like I'm almost in a bubble now, because I can talk to anyone about this indie author or this new book release and people will know, but I can't really do that in real life, because unless you're Stephen King, they're like, who? What is fantasy? What is indie? So that community is huge, and it's really wonderful to be part of that.
Definitely. You're not going to go to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Spotlight event and talk about an author that you particularly love and have the person there go, is that the one that writes about dragons? It's like, it's lovely to meet that like-minded, the enthusiasm that you get from, you know, interacting with people like that. It's so nice to see you found that.
Yeah.
Are there any other events that you've been to or that you're looking forward to going to where you're going to be sort of like that immersion has really, really sort of happened for you, or that you think, you know, I'm really anticipating this event as being a good one for that?
So there's a couple of different types of events, really. There are those that kind of focused on like the sales of the product, and yes, you get to talk to authors, but it's more of like a signing and a sale type thing. And then you have other events a bit like this Spotlight coming up, where there's more chance to talk one-on-one. It's more educational. There's panels, there's kind of mingling over coffee, that kind of vibe. So a couple of events do spring to mind that are more like that, which is probably where I would recommend, because it's a lot more low stress, low pressure. It's not like you're here just to say hi for 2 minutes and then be shoved off of the queue. Bristol Con and Fantasy Con are 2 events, both in the UK. They run annually. They're both in October this year, I think like a week or 2 apart, actually. Bristol Con, by its name, is in Bristol. Fantasy Con moves around a bit. I believe it's in Chester this year, so kind of north-ish in the country. Very similar to our Spotlight event. They run over a couple of days, though, but you will have various authors talking on panels about different topics. There'll be authors doing readings of their books, doing workshops as well on a particular element of the craft. So it could be writing a query letter, or it could be writing battle scenes, or it could be character development, anything like that. You'll tend to see, and there's a lot of authors that attend these, but it feels like it's mostly for the readers in the community, the book bloggers and the booktubers, to come and meet the authors that they've read, meet the publishers. Often they'll have stands there, so you can buy copies and get them signed by the authors who are there. And it's very, very chill. There's, you know, usually a bar there, so you can have a drink, you can have a bite to eat. It's in a town, so there's obviously cafes and coffee shops and things nearby. So you can meet a lot of authors, particularly indie authors, and particularly international authors as well. And you can meet them in a very relaxed environment. You can just fanboy and fangirl, or you can talk more serious things, and you can do that. I don't want to say networking, but that's what it is, but in a really fun and friendly and relaxed environment. And those 2 events are fantastic for that as well. Worldcon, of course, is the big one. Obviously, that's not UK based, although it was this year, but that moves around different countries each year. If you can go to that, that's the biggest of them all. It runs over 5 days. You've got all the international authors coming in, you know, from the Americas and from Asia and Australia, and you've got a lot of the trad guys as well. So you'll have the big names, the big publishers. They do the Hugo Awards, of course. So if you can ever get to a Worldcon, that's the biggest place, and that's where you're going to meet the really big names like Brandon Sanderson and George R.R. Martin and Patrick Rothfuss, all these big authors in the genre. That's where they will go. So something like Fantasy Con and Bristol Con is like a taste of that, but kind of on home soil if you're UK based.
Isn't George R.R. Martin the guy that writes dragons? Isn't he? That
Yeah, he did. He's been known to do that. Yeah. I did hear something about one of his dragon books was supposed to be finished at last year's Worldcon, but I can't quite remember the details of that one.
Yeah. It's great though, isn't it, that there's such a variety of different events. But one of the things that I
Mm,
love is that there's never been an event like the Spotlight event in this area, which is
yeah.
local to Shrewsbury and the Shropshire area. Do you think that the more of these types of smaller local events help to feed those the bigger events, because people can learn so much more from this smaller, more intimate setting than they can from a 5-day epic marathon where you might see the big names, but how much interaction there is kind of like spread across those 5 days. You might learn the same there that you learn in this smaller Spotlight. So I guess that's a very rambly way of asking, what's the importance of these kinds of events like the Spotlight in the grand scheme of event planning?
I think it's really important, and I really hope that they become more popular. I understand it's a lot of hassle in terms of organizing location, authors, panels, people to come, tickets, all that kind of thing. But it's one of those things where unless you attend them, they're not going to happen. So if you want them to happen, please do. You do get small intimate events in bookshops, like Waterstones might do an evening with a local author, or they might bring in a couple of authors with new releases and they'll do a talk and something like that. Normally they're very, very small, like you're talking like 20 seats or something like that, which is great. But I think the more independently organized events are really good, because you can then put your town forward, or you can say, oh, this would be a really great location to have an author event. And unless you're asking for it, people aren't going to know that you want it. The bigger events can be really intimidating, firstly, and they can be really, really overwhelming, secondly. I sell my books at Comic Cons, like the big ones down in London and in Birmingham, and they're these huge convention centres. And despite me having like a table between myself and the crowds, the sensory overload, the noise, the people, it can be so overwhelming. Like I've had anxiety attacks at these events, and even at like FantasyCon and BristolCon, where it's only 2 days, I'm wiped out after that. So having a smaller, more focused and more relaxed setting, I think is really, really important, because not everybody can travel down to these big cities. It's a huge expense if you have to travel in. You're talking trains or fuel or like congestion zone costs, hotel costs, all of that kind of thing. So by having local events, it really helps to cement books as a pillar of that community, in the way that libraries kind of are in some places, used to be in others. It's a place where you can go, you can foster that passion that most of us have, that a lot of us don't have time for. Most readers that I know do it to the exclusion of all else. And most people that don't read want to, but they can't because of time. So if you do have these kind of smaller, more relaxed settings that people can just pop along to for an afternoon, have a bite to eat, meet a local author, maybe pick up a book or two and talk about it, that just keeps the hobby alive in a way. And I think it's really important, especially for people that, maybe neurodivergent, maybe have sensory issues, maybe don't want to travel, for various reasons. I think that then allows them to have a place to go to enjoy the same things that everyone else that goes to, San Diego and New York and London and all these big ones. So I think they're very, very important. And like you said earlier, it's a gathering of like-minded people. So being able to do that and, maybe put names to faces if you're meeting up with people from your local Discord server, or you've spoken to on Book Talk or Book Twitter, that's also really nice as well. And then it's not just, oh, you're this username, you're actually a person, and then friendships can develop and book clubs can grow, and it's healthy community in a way that is not super forced, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense, yeah, and that's been my experience of attending events as well. My first event that I went to, super nervous, didn't know anybody. After the first day of it, I was like, oh, this is great. Why was I nervous? It's brilliant. But if I'd had something like the Spotlight to go to, it would have taken away all of that anxiety, like you mentioned earlier, from just attending the event, you know, and having it set in somewhere like the Nerdy Cafe, which is such a chilled out atmosphere in Shrewsbury. It's absolutely perfect venue for anybody who is maybe a little bit scared of what's this going to be like. Just pop on down and see, because you won't regret it, will you?
Yeah, and with something like the Nerdy Cafe, it's a place that you could probably pop down to ahead of time just to see what it's like, get the vibe, you know, have some tea or coffee. Whereas a lot of the bigger events, they're in, you know, hotels or conference centers, and you'll never be able to do like a practice run, if that makes sense. You know, it's a big event to go to these places, and they can be very overwhelming and very costly. So local events make them so much more accessible, not just from a locations point of view, but from a financial point of view as well. And then if you have a good time, you might visit for other events and be able to actually help them as well. So it's kind of a mutually beneficial arrangement, because I didn't know that the Nerdy Cafe even existed. I didn't know anything like that existed. It was new to me. I didn't know until Holly sent me the link. So I've learned something from that, and now I want to see what's local to me in that kind of similar vein. So it's helping small businesses as well.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that it's feeding that this community of like SFF is feeding a wider community, and it's all so inclusive, isn't it? Because, you know, there's that's one of the things that I love about SFF, is not just the escapism of it, but also the inclusivity of it, which really helps to cement your place in the wider community when you've got events like this that go on. Do you think that that's important for people as well, who are maybe struggling, you know, living in the area of Shropshire, who are maybe struggling to find, you know, people in real life who are like-minded, you know, because it's not as if people walk around with t-shirts saying I'm an SFF fan, come talk to me, is there? Do you think that that's
That
helpful?
would help.
Yeah, we should maybe suggest that as the thing and see what happens. But do you think
Yeah.
it's important as well for people to be having those interactions in real life, and you know, is that helpful?
I think so. We're a very digital generation these days. I mean, it didn't help with COVID, and quite often the internet is the only place you can go to find like-minded people, whether that's books or gaming or a genre of books, whatever that might be. And very often those people are not even in the same country. You know, they're halfway across the world, which is great for keeping those sort of digital relationships alive and kind of learning about other places. But I think still having, I mean, we're social creatures, really, even if we're introverts, even if we don't really like people, even if we would rather just be comfortable at home under a blanket. I think having those physical meetups is really healthy. And I don't mean like a forced meetup, like going to a wedding where you have nothing to say to anyone, or in work where you're just there because you both happen to do the same job at the same place. This is literally your tribe, your people. These are people who will not judge you. These are people who will get giddy over the same books that you've read and authors, and, oh, you've read this series, can I have some recommendations? And you kind of share. We have that a little bit online with like YouTube channels and Discord servers in particular, but being able to have those conversations face to face, I think they foster very, very strong connections. And it's almost less scary, because if you've had conversations with these people online before, it's not like it's not like a blind date, you know, you don't really know who you're going to meet. You already know that they're going to have a good crossover of likes. You've probably spoken to them, or you at least know that you can bond over fantasy books or sci-fi books or authors that you've already read. I think it's very important, and I wish that we could do more of it. It's almost like at Comic-Con, very often I see a lot of people who could turn up in cosplay, and it's the thing that they look forward to all year. They meet up with their online friends and they get to squee about latest costumes and latest anime and things like that. And it's something that people properly look forward to. And I think having local events, even if it's only a couple times a year, is that gives people that option, particularly younger people. I mean, I say younger people as if I'm still 18, but like even adults, you know, when do you find the time to go out and chat and have a good discussion over, you know, a shared passion? You don't really have that unless you're very lucky. So being able to do that in a local environment, it's, you know, beats going to the pub, or it beats, you know, just spending time with other parents of your, you know, your kids' friends. It's your people, and this is the way that you find your people. And very, very real friendships will become of that. Like, I've met people at Comic Cons and events that bought my books and liked my books, so they started out as readers, and then they might become beta readers for me, so they're actually part of my author process now. And a couple of them I consider actual genuine friends who I've met up with and had coffee with, and I would never have known existed had it not been for our shared love of SFF books, which is really weird when you think about it, but it can be life-changing. I know that sounds really cliche.
No, but it's true. It's true. This is what happens. And are you the same as me, where you come away from these events and you're just so inspired to write the next one?
Yeah, 100%. Like, after my initial exhaustion, because it'll drain my social battery, but for like the week or 2 weeks afterwards, I'm like, my head is buzzing with ideas, with conversations, with ways of thinking I hadn't considered, of even just, oh, so that's that author that I've chatted to for like 2 years online. Oh, and he was really, really nice. And, you know, just kind of, the community is largely very wholesome. We don't have a huge amount of like toxicity in it, which is, you know, very rare, I think. So being able to deepen those relationships, and build that real sense of community, so you know that you're not alone in your love of this very weird niche genre, and that you have other people that share that passion and you can talk to and meet up with, and, you know, foster that friendship, I think is wonderful.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely great. So, for anybody that does decide to come along, what are the 2 panels that you're going to be featured on that people can hear you speaking about?
Okay, so the 2 panels that I'm going to be talking on, the first one is called Making the Magic Happen, Magic Systems and Lore in Fantasy, and I'll be alongside Emma L. Adams and Phil Parker. It's mostly going to be talking about building magic systems, examples of really cool lore, how we develop them, weaknesses and strengths, that kind of thing. The second panel is called Ready Draft 1, Getting Started with Your First Novel, and I'll be alongside Stephen Arian and Ed Crocker. And it's basically getting from idea to your first novel. So all of the steps between like that first kind of flash of inspiration to getting the words on paper, to how you edit it, whether you're a plotter or a pantster, and various tips and tricks to help you get started if you're thinking of writing something, or you've always wanted to write something, or if you're in the middle of writing something and you've got stuck. So I think those 2 panels will be really informative and pretty fun and very kind of world building-y. So right up my alley.
Yeah, fantastic. They sound brilliant. And the lineup that you're alongside on those panels is going to be so much fun to be a part of it, because it's just fantastic authors all around, isn't it? So it's so nice to hear that people will be able to come and hear you talk about that. I know that the first draft one is something that is going to be very useful to me, because my first drafts they're just awful. So it's going to be great to come and hopefully hear other authors sort of give me a little bit of reassurance that, you know, that's okay. It's all right. So
it absolutely is. A first draft only has to exist. That's all it has to do. Don't worry about anything else. So yeah, it'll be really fun to talk about that. And I think being transparent about the struggles that we've had as well. It's very easy to look at a published author or a finished book and think, oh, well, clearly you just snapped it out of your head and it came out like that. But no, we hit stumbling blocks. There are seemingly insurmountable walls as well. So I think hearing that other authors that are successful or have books out have the same worries and stresses that everybody else does, and that kind of helps with the connect. It's the same thing that we were talking about earlier with the connection and the community spirit. We're just like you, and we're all part of the same thing, and sharing that encouragement and positivity is really important.
Yeah, we're all in it together.
Yeah.
So for anybody who is going to be attending and maybe wants to check out some of your books before they come, or if they have enjoyed our little chat that we've had together and they want to come and find out more about you, Lauren, where can they find you? What are all of your social handles and that kind of thing online?
So my website is llmacrae.com. I'll have a link tree, a link in bio, a link tree there that has everything. That includes all of my events that I have coming up. So I mentioned that I sell at Comic-Con, so it has all of the events that I have confirmed for the rest of the year. That's all up there in case you're attending any of those. I am on Twitter or X and Instagram, also under LL MacRae, just underscore LL MacRae. I'm on Goodreads as well and in various Discord servers. So if you want to find me online, you can check out any of those. All of my books are available on my website. I sell direct, so you can buy signed copies of the physical books. You can also get ebooks and audiobooks. They're cheaper than on Amazon, as well as some special bundle prices too, and some exclusives that aren't available anywhere else. So it's all there, llmacrae.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today, Lauren. I'm so looking forward to seeing you in Shrewsbury and to picking your brains about this sci-fi that you're writing, because I'm especially excited about that. But it'll be lovely to see you. And yeah, thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been fun.